Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. The UAE's decision to leave OPEC has intensified questions about the long-term viability of producer coordination, coming at a moment when the Iran crisis and repeated disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz are already reshaping global energy security. As quota enforcement weakens and internal tensions deepen across OPEC, we ask whether the cartel is entering a managed decline. We'll discuss the latest now with Heinz Gärtner, professor of political science at the University of Vienna. Good to have you with us.
Good morning.
So with the United Arab Emirates departing OPEC, who wins and who loses here?
OPEC will be a loser in any case because it will weaken, of course, the strength of the organization. The UAE have self-interest now because they think they might be more independent, especially after the end of the war, that the UAE doesn't want to be restricted in its oil production. And OPEC might limit its production, and so the UAE wants to keep more independence in their decision. Also, there might be some influence by the US, by President Trump, who in the past criticized the OPEC anyway. So it might have geopolitical consequences, but not necessarily that this decision by the UAE might also weaken the cooperation of the organization, of the Gulf Cooperation Organization. But that is not necessarily true, because here other geopolitical interests might prevail regional cooperation in the future.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that this would come as to some advantage perhaps to President Donald Trump, but looking at what stands behind this departure, do you see this as something that has come about because of the recent crisis in Iran and the Middle East? Has this been because maybe a longer rivalry with other OPEC members? What was, in your mind, the primary reason this has happened now?
The primary reason, I think, first of all, it's economic self-interest. That's, I think, what influenced the decision mainly. Because there have been rivalries among OPEC members in the past. It didn't really appear in the public that much. However, now that's, of course, is an open break. I rather would have preferred that the UAE would negotiate this primarily within the OPEC organization, because, of course, now OPEC as such will be weakened towards the United States.
Mm-hmm. And just also one quick one as well. I mean, looking at the departure now of the UAE, I mean, this is not the first OPEC member to leave. I believe it was also Qatar a few years ago. Angola also left. So do you see this as a kind of more fracturing in future, or is this going to be limited only to the UAE for now?
No, not necessarily, because also the OPEC in the past got many new members, like so-called OPEC Plus, which sees more interest. So it basically compensates the members who which left the organization. So OPEC Plus is much larger now, but nevertheless, OPEC is responsible for about 40% of the oil production. And so some weaker states see better protection within the organization.
Mm-hmm. And also, let's look at the region a little bit further in the context now of the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, we've had still no, let's say, major developments in easing that. We've had words also from President Trump and also Marco Rubio, who's called this a nuclear economic issue in the Strait of Hormuz. So where are we with this? Any closer to talks or solutions in this direction?
There are several proposals out there, and the latest by Iran, that it wants to focus first on opening the Strait of the nuclear issue. But I think the problem is a double sequencing because if we discuss the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, we do have a blockade, and the Iranians think that the Americans should lift the blockades, and the Americans think that should the strait.
So we were covering there the latest of the developments in the Middle East with the departure of the UAE of OPEC, and we've had some slight connection issues there with our guest in Vienna. But we'll try and continue. Professor, we have you back now. Can you just give us, you were talking about the situation in Hormuz and the latest proposals. Also, we have a statement here from the Iranian Defense Ministry spokesperson saying that, I'm quoting here, that the U.S. can no longer be in a position to dictate its policies to independent nations and must abandon its illegal and irrational demands. Any reasonable expectations to this ending anytime soon?
We do have this double blockade, so I said it this already before, I repeat myself. The Iranian blockade of the strait, which is not 100%, but also the American blockade. And if we talk about lifting the blockades, it's a question which one comes first. The Iranians, of course, want the American blockade to be lifted, and the Americans only think about the Iranian closure of the strait. So there is a debate about sequencing. And of course, also there's the question who can sustain this current blockade situation longer, Iran or the US. The US itself is not really dependent on the strait, but the world economy and also the rising gas prices and rising prices in diesel and fertilizers. So President Trump is under pressure as well. But of course, the blockades also hurt Iran. So I would think it is necessary to de-link, to decouple the strait, this negotiations from the nuclear issue. Parallel, there could be a debate on the nuclear issue, what President Trump wants, but Iran has excluded so far in his latest proposal. But nuclear issue is not that difficult to come to an agreement because lots have been achieved already in Geneva in 2025 and 2026.
Mm-hmm. And one, I think, concern also for Central Europe, for Europe as a whole, is very much LNG, is gas storage. I mean, this is usually now we're approaching the late spring, early summer, when usually we have a lot of this, our reserves being refilled. That's not happening right now, or not to the scale we need it. How much of a danger is our supply in Europe if this isn't sorted?
In the long run, it will be, of course. And we hear the European leaders already a little bit softening the tone towards Iran. So they might think there can some bilateral agreements with Iran that shipping through the Strait of Hormuz would be possible and could be negotiated, not against, of course, the US. But if there is some agreement, the Europeans want to have some advantages first. And we just have heard Chancellor Merz from Germany saying the US is humiliating Iran, which is a softer tone towards Iran. So it's saying not that much, but it shows that the Europeans are under pressure as well.
Mm-hmm. And also curious about China as well. I mean, they're absorbing about 80% of those Iranian oil exports. They've been also hoping this is resolved. Where are we with China's position in this?
Yeah, of course, China is affected, not that much, but at least 10% of the energy comes from Iran. But we have seen the last meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization 2 days ago, when Chinese officials and Iranian officials talked on the sidelines. So there might be some, but China wants to be a mediator as well. So China has been a mediator in the past already between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But when Iranian Foreign Minister Rajki went to Moscow, but he also went to Islamabad and to Oman. And China is the third possible mediator here. So Russia is not so much a mediator. Russia is just necessary, indispensable support for diplomatic solutions in the future.
Mm-hmm. All right, so giving us the latest there in the Middle East, from an OPEC departure of the UAE to the latest geopolitical situation. Thank you so much for that. Always a pleasure speaking with you. I was Professor Heinz Gärtner from the University of Vienna. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.